Madam President, members of the board, good evening. This is a quarterly update on the progress of our budget for the 2011-12 school year. It's required by policy. So you have in your materials about a 5-page thing that goes fund by fund, kind of selected funds. It shows the budget, it shows what we've spent so far, what's encumbered, and an amount and a percentage that's left. If you look it over, I mean, it's apparent that that's what it is, and the progress is fairly typical. So I would like to go into just a little bit. I believe it's the second page that has Fund 11 at the top. That page has our 3 classroom site funds on it. Fund 11 goes directly to base pay for teachers. Fund 12 is the merit pay for teachers, and 13 has some options, and our school district has chosen to put that fund entirely in the teacher salary schedule as well. And it's been that way since the inception of this program. And the reason I wanted to mention that is these 11 and 13 are 2 of the funds that when we began to cut our M&O budget in earnest 3 or 4 years ago, this was one of the funds that we began to spend a little more than our revenues in order to offset deeper cuts and, you know, to hopefully make it through this period. Fund 11 and 13 are now at the end of that. At the end of this year, we won't have any surplus left, and we'll be able to spend what we're allowed or what we're appropriated in future years. And so that difference is on my budget slide that we're showing now at community councils and events like that. And so that's that funding will have to be replaced. That surplus amount we've been spending will have to be replaced either with the reduction or by other funds. So that's why I want to mention that.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you just repeat what you said about the restriction? I kind of missed what you said in terms of both Fund 11 and 13.
Oh, what they're used for, or what they're...
No, in terms of we were spending more to offset the cuts, but then we won't be able to do that anymore. Where does that restriction come from? Is it self-imposed?
We've carried forward funds in the past. During brighter budget times, we did have some rainy day funds in more than one area. This was one of them. So we agreed to spend a little bit more than we take in each year in order to not reduce our budget further. The rest of the areas we do that in are fine. This one now is added in, so we either need to make more reductions or replace that funding somewhere else.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
Yeah, these 3 funds are funded by a sales tax, and the payment that we got in December, we get a payment every month, was significantly higher than the 2 prior Decembers. I kind of keep a graph of that. And so hopefully, you know, you hear on the news that sales taxes are increasing. Maybe it's beginning to show on our ledger now, so that would be nice. So other than that, y'all have any budget questions in general?
Is that the 1%?
No.
Okay.
The 1% we don't get a check for per se. That goes to the general fund, and that offset further cuts to K-12 education, but those monies aren't distributed specifically to school districts. This was Prop 301 from 10 or so years ago. Any other questions?
Thank you, Scott. Okay, more bad news. All right, general governing board representatives. This is for the ASBA network representative and the legislative liaison.
Currently, I'm the legislative liaison.
You are.
Yeah.
Who is our ASBA network representative?
Me.
What does that mean, network representative?
So what I've interpreted that role to be would be a link to the ASBA, to have regular conversations, and to be the default delegate for voting purposes, even though we always nominate someone before the action. But I would definitely pass the torch because I don't really necessarily enjoy those conferences anymore.
Okay. Do we have any,
I think Jack's been doing a terrific job. I think that he has the expertise and the access to share the legislative stuff or updates with us. So, and I think that if we were going to take action or need something at the legislature, we would have a conversation beforehand and appoint a liaison, just like we do with the ASBA stuff. So what I would like to do is move the governing board approve the following recommendations regarding board representatives. Number 1, legislative liaison, Matt Jewett. Arizona School Board Association Network Representative, Tiffany Arenas.
I second that.
okay, it's been moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And back to our legislative liaison for a political report.
Okay, and,
Hold up.
oh, wait, is it coming out? Is there,
Yes.
it's not,
It's an information.
it's under information.
It's under information, where is it reported to me?
I see administrative content, executive content. Oh, do I need to go? like in
Under,
one group?
Well,
under the welcome tab, where it says important
Oh,
documents.
gotcha. Okay, welcome.
And the one that says information is the one where both your information's in there and Carl's.
Great. Carl, do you want to talk about yours first?
Sure. A couple of political updates that might affect us. There is a recommendation from the Joint Legislative Study Committee on Unification and Consolidation of School Districts. They made recommendations in December. You should have received an email last week with the actual recommendations, and they've been put into a bill form. If you'd like to track it, it's HB 2075, I believe. I'd also be happy to bring the updates. But basically, if this is approved by the legislature, the county superintendent would be charged with conducting a feasibility study to examine what possible configurations there could be for consolidated or unified school districts, and also identify savings, and of course they would require the legislature to fund this study. So nevertheless, I want us to be aware that this is out there because it could potentially affect us. And one of the things that I'd like us to keep in mind is that if it's passed, I mean, the way it works is the county superintendent isn't required to examine every school district in the county. It's up to their discretion to come up with recommendations. So they could just look at a small piece, they could look at the whole county. And I know that with our county being as large as it is, it's unlikely that Don Covey would consider a configuration for 58. Like maybe he thinks it would be 13 districts or 50 districts, I don't know. The point would be that if this moves forward, I'd like us to have a conversation so that we can at least have a say in what we'd like that to be for Creighton, if anything. Because if we're left by the wayside and there are bigger, more lean districts built around us, that could also affect us in a negative way. So I just want us to be aware that this is out there.
How is Marty Schultz involved or not involved in
He's not.
this unification proposal?
He's not. In fact, none of his recommendations were taken by the committee. The committee actually was comprised of educators from around the state and legislators, Republican, Democrat, House and Senate, and school business officials. And what they did is they took the bigger they call the proposals, and then just whittled it down to the things that they all could put their name on it. So this is the big one that's running, but I will also say that it would not be unlikely if someone like Representative Fillmore ran a different bill like he did last year in addition to this. I don't know that that would go anywhere. This one may, because it's been signed off by a number of educators that believed in it. So
Does ASBA have a position on these recommendations? Should they be put to a bill?
So they were neutral last year on the process, and Janice Palmer spoke favorably about the process at the last meeting. So I don't know if they have an updated position, but they didn't think that it was, they definitely weren't opposed to it because it wasn't mandated. There wasn't like all the districts have to. The first step would be that the county superintendent does a feasibility study. Because number one, if the feasibility study doesn't show that there's going to be savings or an improved curriculum or anything of that nature, it wouldn't go anywhere. That feasibility study would then go to the school boards that are affected. If they approve it, there would be no election. If they don't, it would go to election, but they also have to be approved by the State Board of Ed. So there's a number of checks along the way.
I think it sounds like a better process than some of the alternatives, and I'm glad that we're actually looking at studying it, not just for the sake of saying let's stop this, etc. Let's study it and never do anything about it. But the truth is that it does create winners and losers when it comes to property taxes in particular. We don't know the effect yet on academic achievement, and so I think those are things that need to be considered as well. And generally we've asked, in the past when this went to voters, they were being asked to do this without a whole lot of information on how this would affect them. So I think having that feasibility study, in some cases there may be a savings to and a natural fit to unifying or consolidating districts, and in others it simply may not be a good idea. You have districts, I don't know if it's changed, but there are a couple, whatever's out by Palo Verde, I don't know if that's Arlington or which. And then also Fountain Hills used to be the two that received no state money because they had a property tax base that was so large it supported their students. So when you merge with from a district like that, especially given the breakdown that we have between businesses versus homeowners, and you're one of a few residents that lives next to Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant, undoubtedly Palo Verde is paying the vast majority of the property taxes to support a very small district. If you merge in with a district that took in all of metropolitan Phoenix, let's say, I would have to imagine that your property taxes are going to go up because the balance between business and individual is considerably different.
They had a ASBA workshop on this, and they presented this, and I believe Robin, I'm not sure if you were at that one, Robin and I went, and my main question is, they were talking about, this is looking at the students more, rather than the money part. It's for students, And my question was, okay, you have all these things to unify or consolidate. What if it doesn't work and your test scores go in the tank? Do you have a process to go back? Because if you're for the students, you have to have it both ways. You can't always go one way and say, the gate's shut now, you can't go back. And it is a big step one way or another. I didn't get any applause for that.
I
can't imagine.
I was proud.
Yeah, this is what I heard throughout the testimony, throughout the 5 months that they met. It was a matter of, let's have an honest conversation about what does work and what doesn't work. And the myth is that there's already a process where people can go and unify if they want to.
Right.
The challenge is that there are several districts in the state that have tried, and they've had a number of challenges and blocks along the way. Not even just money, but technical glitches in the language. So the general idea was to create a process. And the thing is it's not like you have a process and you're done. The process would have to be taken out of the legislative, out of the law, out of the statutes to block it. So I know that Don Covey, who's our county superintendent, was very adamant in the conversation and on testimony that if it didn't produce greater academic results and if there wasn't an ability to focus on the kids, he would totally be against it. So I think that being that it's on the record, we need to hold him accountable to that.
Absolutely.
And if this comes through to fruition, that we engage in the dialogue and make sure that we have a say and engage our community in having a say one way or another, or in what shape that might look. I can keep you posted as this moves through the legislature. It's something I'm working on with in my professional job, so that's why I brought it forward.
The other things that actually Mr. Saragosa had brought up with me and wanted me to discuss, but I think it's also important, we've talked about it before, without detail, is the redistricting process. We do have tentative final draft, I don't remember the language, districts drawn for both the legislature and the congressional districts. This is something that will probably face continued challenges, legal challenges. In the last decade, you may remember there was a challenge on the legislative lines, which pretty much continued through most of the decade. And there was they used the lines in 2002 at the beginning of the decade. They redrew them midway through a little bit, and then they used separate lines for 2004. And then they kept those, and those continued to be subject to litigation. I am looking first at the congressional districts, and you will see that Congressional District 9 is a new one that's being created, taking in Ahwatukee, West Chandler, Tempe, West Mesa, South Scottsdale, and parts of Arcadia, Central Phoenix, North Central, Biltmore area. It's designed to be highly competitive between both parties. That is where most of the northern part of the Creighton School District lies. The exception on the northern part is the little bit of Creighton that is in the town of Paradise Valley, which I think a lot of people don't realize that Creighton includes part of the town of Paradise Valley, would be in Congressional District 6. That is a district where there's probably going to be a primary between Congressman Schweikert and Congressman Quayle, who both have sizable parts of their current district are in that district. The southern part of our district, District 7, is slightly scaled down, but very similar to the current district of Congressman Ed Pastor.
So if these lines are approved, Creighton will still span 3 congressional districts?
Yes, I think we do 2 right now.
6, 7, and 9.
That is correct.
Okay, and number 9, just so I'm clear, because it looks like encompasses a good half of our district. The contenders that we know at this point would be possibly David Shapiro, Kirsten Sinema. What about on the Republican side? Because you said this is slated to be competitive.
Possibly Councilman Sal DeCiccio, I have heard. I don't know. I think Mayor Hugh Hallman of Tempe said he was not going to run, but I could be mistaken on
This is
that.
for state legislature?
This is for congressional, for district, yes,
Uh-huh.
District 9, and I don't recall. I am sure I've heard 1 or 2 other names.
Steve Moak, maybe? Well, I asked because 2 years ago there were 10 Republicans vying for
Yes.
the seat, and I didn't know if you had any speculation they would come back. I didn't read many of the names other than Steve Moak, and it seemed like they were slow to jump at the opportunity to run for Congress this time.
Probably several of them might. I honestly, it sounds like the Democrats, well, certainly former Senator Sinema has
So we're just...
moved forward with a campaign. Mr. Shapiro might, but I have heard very little, heard less from the Republicans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving to the legislative districts. Take just a moment. Pull up. We are also here again split between some districts. District 28 in the northern part would from LD, from our standpoint, would be similar to the portion that's in legislative district 11 at this time. I think from my map, which isn't, this is the whole county, but it looks like basically we might have a slight little bit more. The line where LD 11 and 15 divide might be moved a little further north.
Yeah. It looks like the line goes directly through Biltmore Prep.
It does. It's probably on Campbell.
Do you know if that, so then it would likely be in 28?
Probably.
Okay.
And then District 24 actually takes in probably the largest portion of our district. That one will be somewhat similar to the current legislative District 15, except that it, rather than taking in some area northwest over by I-17, it cuts off a little bit further, or it doesn't go that far west. Instead, it kind of shifts east and takes in parts of South Scottsdale. At one point there was a draft that would have put that district in with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, which would have been interesting. That South Scottsdale, parts of Central Phoenix. The southern end of the district on this map would be just a small part in that District 27, it looks like, which is South Phoenix. Currently, none of our district is in the South Phoenix Legislative District, which would also, in this case, include, it looks like, the Gila River Indian community.
I'm between 24 and 27. What's the dividing street there? I really can't make
It looks like it is probably Van Buren.
Okay.
Going to 24th Street.
Right.
Then it goes upward to McDowell. Right. And then I'm not entirely sure, I bet that follows the canal diagonally down, because that's the only thing that goes diagonally there.
There'd be parts of our district then would be with the Queen Creek.
So I think of this in terms of who the representatives would be at the legislature that should be serving our community. So in 24, I saw that Katie Hobbs is going to run for Senate, and it's a 60%, 60-40 split, right?
Yeah, it's a Democratic leading district.
And so, who's that? Does that move Chad Campbell into our district?
Correct. And on the Senate side, my understanding is that former Senator Ken Chevron is looking at also running probably for the Senate. In the House, it would put Leila Alston and Chad Campbell into that district.
Okay. And then in 27, Ruben Gallego, I know, is going to run, and a new face, Reginald Bolding. Do you know if Catherine Miranda will be seeking re-election?
I honestly don't know, but I have to imagine that she would be within these boundaries, and Senator Leah Landrum Taylor would also be within these boundaries, and she
and that's also
is not
heavily Democrat.
Correct.
Yes.
I just want you all to know that, because I don't know her, but Leah Landrum Taylor was on the Committee on Unification and Consolidation, and so was Ruben Gallego, but neither of them ever showed up to any of the meetings.
I know.
Okay.
And District 28 at the northern end,
I think that's a big deal.
I agree.
that is the district that is currently Representative Eric Meyer, Representative Kate Brophy McGee, and Senator Adam Driggs. I don't know exactly where they all reside at, but I think that all three of them may very well be in that district.
Are they all running for re-election?
None of them are termed out. And I haven't heard anything that would indicate otherwise. I haven't heard that they're running for other positions. That district has probably a very similar makeup to District 11, the current District 11, might be slightly more competitive, but it's got to be very, very similar.
So Matt, looking at the big picture, and how would this shift the balance of power at the Capitol?
More districts are competitive, being that they're closer in terms of not just registration, but performance between the two parties, with the idea that you then have a greater chance of electing either a Republican or a Democrat, the idea behind competitiveness is to not have so many legislators elected in their primaries without having to go forward with a general election. To accomplish that, there are other competing goals that the Independent Redistricting Commission had to take into consideration, including making sure that there were enough districts that could elect people, basically communities of color, other diverse groups, or historically marginalized groups, and then also to have some sense of compactness and keeping communities of interest together, which is not something that the statute really defines. The constitutional amendment, I suppose, does.
So you think on a whole, this should result in moderating the legislature?
That's the hope and the idea, and that there are more people closer to the center who can work together. Whether that happens is remains to be seen. And then I also there was an email today, in case you did not see it, from Janice Palmer of the ASBA regarding the governor's State of the State, which was delivered yesterday. The governor also has a detailed policy agenda, which I have not read, the 4 cornerstones of reform, centennial edition, since everything for the governor yesterday was focused on Arizona Centennial. The 4 points are economic competitiveness, education, state government, that's her broader agenda. The education part is focusing this year, and we heard this a lot at the ASBA conference, on the implementation of all of the new education framework, not having additional reforms. It's kind of giving schools a year off of major reforms to implement, since we've had quite a bit.
Well, that's been reinforced by Senator Crandall and Representative Goodale as well, Education Committee Chairman.
Correct. Also, the launch of a campaign to encourage parents to read to their children. Again, I don't know any details on that, or if there are any. Creation of a searchable database that will allow parents to research a teacher's license and disciplinary action. Reform of the teacher decertification process by establishing professional practices and mandating automatic loss of teacher certification for certain offenses, and reforming investigatory process. And then tasking the Arizona Ready Council to develop recommendations for legislative consideration to fund reforms that promote the results we want in both K-12 and higher ed. The governor had previously left open whether or not she would support an extension of the temporary sales tax, and I think she made it pretty unequivocal that she will oppose that, any effort to extend that.
There will be a bill adjusting the new teacher principal evaluation framework, and as soon as that's released, well, I guess at the next board meeting, I'd be happy to share details and keep the board informed on the progress of that.
Quite informative.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Future agenda items.
I would like to add a couple for future agenda items. One is to report back on what we learned at ASBA, the way we do from NSBA. The second is I talked a little bit with Representative Goodale when I was at the conference, who is the chair of the Education Committee and also a longtime member of the governing board in Kingman, where they voluntarily unified. And I asked if she would be interested in coming to, or someone she knows who is involved in the process, to talk to us about what they went through in terms of voluntary unification. And then...
And what was her response?
Yes.
Okay.
I think her response was, she's here during the week anyway because she has to be for the legislature, so as long as they're in session and there's nothing going on. And then there was something I wanted to look at, scheduling that was a future one. It might just be that our next meeting, Brooke Tolles-Johnson, from the Central Phoenix First Things First Regional Director, when I had invited her, I had mentioned that we meet the first and third Tuesdays, and this month is an exception because school wasn't back in session on the first Tuesday. So I don't know if it's possible. I can follow up with her if someone else wants to. Well, I can go ahead and do that. Just let her know. I'll follow up with her and let her know that don't show up next Tuesday, basically.
gonna try to schedule her for the,
She is scheduled, I believe, for the
Yes.
for the 24th, but I just don't know if she knows that.
Oh, be good to let her know.
Yes.
No, I think it wasn't, I thought I had put on information on move on when reading, but I don't see it on here.
Yeah, it was on.
So I'll happily fill out another card if need be.
Okay.
Did you had already filled one out? I'll look at the back one.
Okay.
I might have accidentally deleted it.
Okay. Yeah, because
Or
I'd
if that's
like
the same thing to look
to
here.
learn about our preparation for that.
Any others? Should I have a motion, please?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved to second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.